Follow the conversation. This is Afternoons on the Dove.
Good afternoon and welcome to Afternoons on the Dove. What a delight today for me to have on the program with us today a very special friend of mine who's truly been a true friend to me personally and also a friend of this ministry. And, well, Darryl Howard and I have even worked together in the past. And, in fact, this man's research has changed a lot in what I do and the way I think about the way we do programming, especially Christian programming in radio and television. He's an expertise in market research and developing of the cutting-edge communication using generational science and neuromarketing. He's worked 6 years with Grizzly Adam Production in market research and 20 years in politics, working with over 150 candidates, including yours truly, yes, and consults with businesses on generational behavior, crisis period communications, and neuromarketing. 7 movies Darryl has worked on, and has won over 77 national and international independent film awards with the movie, his consulting work there in the movie industry. By the way, jot this email down or this website down and use it as a tremendous resource in your work. Generationalscience.com. That's generationalscience.com. And you'll be able to talk to Darryl anytime you want. You can email him, Darryl@darrylhoward.com. And Darryl, what a delight, my friend, to have you with us. Good to see you from up there in the cold country of Idaho.
Thanks, Perry. All the snow's gone at the moment, so
good.
we're grateful for that, but it's on the way, I'm sure.
All right. I want to get right into this. We want to talk about something today I think that will affect everybody. Everybody's concerned about the condition of the world and the condition of our country. And before we get into the depths of this, let me ask you this. In your research as a generational science and neuromarketing expert, are we experiencing something new, or are we experiencing something that is somewhat cyclical?
It's cyclical. A lot of people think that it's new because they've never seen it before. And that which we're not familiar with, we say, oh, we don't have a program on the brain that says, oh, I know how to deal with this. I've driven downtown 200 times. I know all the roads. I know how to get there. And you come across a period of time like this, and you say, this is different. What's going on? Something's changed. And but in actuality, we've been through it before.
All right, because there's almost a sense of hopelessness this time, in spite of the fact that we're in a digital age and information is at everybody's fingertips. We still can't seem to get a handle of what the problem is. And so with that in mind, what led you to do this kind of research and to find out where we are?
Well, Chuck Cellier, the president, CEO, supervising producer of Grizzly Adams, he passed away earlier this year. Several years ago, he had given me the book Generations, and he said, if you read this, you'll never lose another election. It was several years before I read it. I should have read it earlier. I'm sorry, Miko.
That's all right.
And
everything's providential.
That's right. So I saw the book, The Fourth Turning, by the same authors. I picked it up and I began to read it. And everything all of a sudden made sense. That generations repeat themselves, that these cycles of history repeat themselves. And for instance, baby boomers. Baby boomers are the same archetype of, say, Abraham Lincoln, of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, of Winston Churchill. So if you want to know what the future looks like, you look back to the past, and you can see that these generations repeat themselves and that there's cycles in history that repeat themselves. And so it's you mentioned hope earlier. Mm-hmm. We're going through a period of winter. Mm-hmm. The good news is spring comes, and the flowers bloom again. It just seems like it, when it's 3 feet of snow on the ground.
All right, so the two books here, we had the pictures up of them just a few moments ago. Generation, The History of America's Future, and this was 1584 to 2069 by William Strauss and Neil Howe. And then they followed up with a book called The Fourth Turning. Is that correct?
That's right. The Fourth laid out generations and how they repeat themselves. Then they took a look at the flip side of the coin, and they said that crises happen with generations, but if you looked at it, could actually lay that out. And what they did exactly was that in 1997. It's been incredibly accurate. Let me give you a quote. What they said in 1997, an impasse over the federal budget reaches a stalemate. The president and Congress both refuse to back down, triggering a near total government shutdown. The president declares emergency powers. Congress rescinds his authority. Dollar and bond prices plummet. The president threatens to stop Social Security checks. Congress refuses to raise the debt ceiling. Default looms. Wall Street panics.
Wow.
You could have written that yesterday. I mean, you know, but to have had the foresight to write that back in 1997, it's huge. I mean, it's huge.
Now, 1997, but you begin to implement this work about 2005 into your work, and how did you use that, and how did that come about?
Well, we were asked by a top political consultant in Washington, D.C., to take the research that we were using for the movies and encapsulate that for some of his candidates. One of the slides that we used was actually a picture from the Great Depression of these two guys walking alongside the road, and funny enough, the billboard says, "Next time, relax, try the train." And we found out, shift gears, that well, there were two hit songs in the early 1930s, Brother, Can You Spare a Dime, and We're in the Money, and just a few years apart, they were both hits. And so when they did change the billboards, all of a sudden it was, you know, men out of work keep walking, no work here, and it was sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. So we were able to take that and use it to predict what people would like in movies, in emotions in the future. And that was one of the main reasons, really, that we were using it at the time.
All right. Now, the other part of your research that is so fascinating to me, and the stuff that I now have incorporated even here at the Dove, is how you have looked at the various generations. And we're talking, you can get into that, from millennials up through the Xers to the silencers and all of that. Maybe you can highlight that. But how they meshed with the actual turnings of history. And let me ask you this. From your point of view, we're in a fourth turning. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So how did the generational science and the turnings mesh, especially where we are today?
Well, what Strauss and Howe found was that generations repeat themselves and the turnings repeat themselves, and they kind of interlock, like interlocking gears. And certain points in history, a new social mood strikes. And you can look at it over history, what those different strikes of mood. If we look at what the different turnings are, basically a new social mood comes about and a new turning happens. If we look back in history, you can think autumn, winter. And there's four turnings in history. The first turning is a high. If you think of post-World War II, you think of in Times Square, there's the famous kiss of the soldier kissing the gal in Times Square on VJ Day. Everybody was up, things were rolling. Okay, you can compare that to spring. And then in second turnings, all of a sudden you get into the 1960s and the 70s, and you get into the Cultural Revolution. I mean, the consciousness revolution, and actually big, Chuck and I always used to comment that how can we go from the consciousness revolution to guys like Rick Warren writing? This is a natural thing for boomers to go through in their lifetime. And then third turnings are an unraveling. We tear down institutions. We rearrange things. Each one of these periods is about 20 to 25 years. And we live in a society where 30 seconds at a drive-through window at Burger King seems like a long time. And so when you look at these cycles, they're very long periods of time. And historically, very. But I think at third turnings, when everything's coming apart, Peggy Noonan really summed it up best by an article about 2005, where she said, it feels like the wheels are off the trolley's off the track, and we're hurtling in some unknown direction. I mean, to paraphrase her.
What was the date on that? What was the date on that one?
It was in 2005.
Okay.
And I can get you the exact site if you want, but she said that there was a sense that things were broken and that somehow they wouldn't be fixed or anytime soon. And so that third turnings, and then fourth turnings are a crisis period of, it's really driven by defensive values. It's a spectacular upheaval that we would never have imagined in the 1990s.
All right, so we're talking to Darryl Howard today, and he's a neuromarketing specialist as well as a generational science specialist, dealing with us today on the issues of turnings that go on in history, first, second, third, and fourth turning. If Peggy Noonan wrote that in 2005, and here we are now going into 2012, you know, that's obviously 6-7 years later. Was 2005 the beginning of a fourth turning where the unraveling took place? I mean, was she now noticing that that was the beginning of something?
I don't know. I think it was more like 2007, 2008,
right, when
we had the economic crash. That's comparable to the crash of 1929. And but one thing I found about Peggy Noonan is she has a sense of history that it's like a deft touch, that she seems to sense these things. I don't know if she's ever studied generational science, but she seems to be in tune with the emotions of the public and what's going on.
All right. And so where would that put us in the? You would clearly say now that we are in a fourth turning, the unraveling, the driven by defensive values. I mean, we're now arguing who's right and who's wrong. I've in my lifetime, I've never experienced a polarization in our country like we're experiencing right now.
Yeah, and if you we'll later we'll get into this, but while you're talking about it, if you look back in history, we are red versus blue today, but we're equally blue versus gray as red coat versus blue coat. And these are similar periods in our history. I mean, these are all fourth turnings. You know, but there are a lot of good things that come out of a fourth turn too.
All right.
So
let me take a quick break here, Darryl, while we have a time to do that. Darryl Howard's with us today, and let me encourage you to check out generationalscience.com, and also check out, you can email Darryl if you want follow-up on this. If you are a business, maybe you are running a large business or a small business, he does do some consulting on this. And it's pretty fascinating, I have to tell you this. And I can tell you that we've made some adjustments here at the Dove and have seen the response. And you can email him, Darryl@darrylhoward.com. But check out the website, generationalscience.com. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove. Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove.
Okay, We're back, and got a little bit of a technical glitch, but we'll get it worked out. And Darryl, you're with us?
I'm with you.
Okay, good. You may want to lean forward just a little bit, just so we get a little bit. We had some audio drop out, but maybe leaning forward might help it. Besides, it gives us a better picture of your pretty face. Darryl Howard's with us today, and he is a neuromarketing specialist and a generational science expert. And it's fascinating research, but more importantly, it's research that is based upon some history, and I think we need to take note of. We're dealing in particular today a thing called fourth turning. First, second, third, are we into a fourth turning where we see a repeat in history where things seem to be so chaotic, and I think we would see that today. And, I'm just surprised how many people almost have given up hope in this mess that we're in. And you know what's interesting about this, Darryl? It doesn't seem to be just the United States. I don't know of a country in the world today that doesn't have its problems.
The fourth turning cycles are global. I mean, we see the synchronization. You know, at the same time of the American Revolution, you saw the French Revolution. You know, you give a few years here, a few years there. But the same thing happened during World War II, whether it be Australia's unemployment rate or Canada's unemployment rate. And a lot of the generations are the same, too. The birth years may be slightly different. For instance, in Great Britain, the air raid generation is very similar to America's silent generation. We find the millennial generation, or Gen Y, some people call Gen Y, is worldwide too. In Germany, they're called the nose-off generation, as in no trouble. And so we see these similar characteristics throughout the world, both in generations and in turnings.
All right, let's go back, say, 500 years and get some recaps of fourth turnings. And I see back on your chart here, I don't think we have this chart up, but we do have, well, I guess we do. All right, the Reformation, and go ahead with that.
Yeah, well, every one of these cycles goes through, it's about 80 to 100 years, and they go through a first turning, a high, a second turning, which is usually some kind of an awakening, a spiritual history, the first Great Awakening, second Great Awakening, third Great Awakening, and then the consciousness revolution of the 60s. All of these were times of spiritual upheaval. And then we go into third turnings, and we see that things seem to come unraveling, whether it be in the Tudor Sakelum. A Sakelum is about 100 years, and we see the restoration, but then each one of these fourth turnings normally culminates in some kind of a war. The Armada Crisis, the War of the Roses, the American Revolution, the Civil War, the World War II. Usually these are border redefining wars. And so what I would anticipate, this fourth turning seems to be shaping up very similar to the Great Depression and World War II. I would imagine probably be some kind of a war. Maybe it's a cyber war. I don't know. Where exactly it comes from, nobody can be quite certain.
Do you think the war on terror qualifies for that?
I think that yes. And I think that if you look back in history, I was always amazed at the taking of Constantinople, because they developed this huge 30-inch cannon. And as soon as they had that weapon, they deployed it to breach the walls of Constantinople. And that was during the fourth turning. And the same thing happened with the atomic bomb. As soon as the atomic bomb was built, we're going to cure this one big problem. And so we throw everything at it. And so the war on terror is probably a component, and we usually see that it's got three components to it: debt, and we'll talk about it later. Debt, civic decay, and global disorder. And I've often looked at the seedling, I'd call it, of Occupy Wall Street and some of the events that are going on there, and then.
All right, let me ask you this. Let's take a look back on and see if there's some parallels. We'll do the Civil War, which is a fourth turning, the Great Depression, and World War II, another fourth turning, and where we are today. What are the parallels?
Well, I think that if you look back, for one thing, I mean, you said I worked with 150 candidates. When you look back politically, and you look at the economics of it, currently we've pegged us at about the late fall, early winter of 1931. And so if you look at it and what happened, the stock market crashed in 1929. It really didn't bottom out until late into 1932. It didn't come back to that same pre-crash position until 1954. Things that will be important are basic needs, food, fire, water, shelter, those types of things. And one thing about a fourth turning is we've been through crises before. We've been through floods. We've been through famine or whatever it may be. The difference is that in a fourth turning, we react differently. Let me give you an example. In 1993, the World Trade Center was bombed. It was bombed twice. In 1993, we formed a commission, and that was part of the process. And then in September 11, 2001, we react differently. We just take out two foreign countries. And so what happens speeds up. Private life slows down. Allstate has an ad, the back to basics, the simple things in life. You can have a vacation 10 feet from your front door. I mean, these really encapsulate where we're at emotionally. And then in businesses I consult with, how to talk emotionally to their consumers.
All right. Let me move along here because I also want to, just if I can, maybe save a few moments at the end of our time together, a little bit on the political side of things. But it seems, Darryl, that we came into this fourth turning so fast. But if you look back, it really started to show up. Well, Peggy Noonan said it in 05, but here we are now in 012, and it seems like this thing just rushed on us. I mean, we're just all of a sudden we are out of control. We have no answers. So how fast do these things come?
My daughter brought me Time magazine in 2008, October 13th, 2008.
Yeah, there it is up on the screen.
She said, look, Dad, it's exactly what you said. Now, I have to tell you, the market was at about 11,000, on its way to 14,000. And we said that there would be an economic crash based on all the data that we can gather, and therefore here's how you need to communicate differently. There were a lot of people that thought we were nuts, but everything. One guy came back and he said, everything you've said over the last 18 months has happened exactly like you laid it out. It's like beats in a movie, and it just played itself out. It happens. It happened faster and stronger probably than even we could anticipate. Unless you lived through the Depression, unless you lived through the Civil War, you really didn't understand the depth of it. And we're living that time now. And we'll look back and our kids will say, "Oh yeah, that was nothing."
All right. Is there somewhat of an autonomy to a fourth turning? I mean, is there? Does it? And if there is, where are we in that cycle?
Well, first of all, there's a catalyst that strikes a new mood, and all of a sudden the nation the nation, 2007, 2008 would be the economic. Leading up to that was probably Wilma, Rita, and Katrina, the floods. If you look back 1927, for some reason, natural disasters and economic, they're intertwined. And Delta was the same thing. Florida land debacle. These things are pretty predictable. So there's a catalyst that strikes a new mood. Then you enter a phase called the regeneracy, where we start throwing everything at it that we possibly can. We try, in FDR's time, in the Great Depression, it was the CCC camps, the WPA, the National Recovery Act, all the. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work. We were willing to endure faulty leadership. Because, well, he was doing his best, or, the Civil War was the same type of thing.
Hope he changey?
Hope he changey, yeah. A group publishing, Christian book publishing out of Loveland, Colorado. We had done a deal for them, I think in 2006. And a presentation to their company, and hope would be the thing that would sell. And I look at Obama's campaign, and yeah, we told you hope, okay? You didn't do it. So the third thing that happens is a climax during this 4 parts of the turning itself. And it's kind of a sequence of events. And the climax is the equivalent to nature's raging typhoon. Everything that's not lashed down gets taken with it. And we build together everything we can to solve this one big problem, whatever the one big problem is. And then all of a sudden we have a resolution to it. We take Berlin. The Japanese surrender on the ship at the end of World War II. Lee surrenders to Grant. All these things, or even Cornwall's second surrenders to George Washington's second. Mm-hmm. That's the way that these things usually end.
Wow.
And so right now, I think we're moving out of the catalyst into the regeneracy. So this is a very early process. I've seen figures where it will last till about 2028. Originally, it said we were looking at 2025. Now it's 2028, which actually bodes well, because the more that baby boomers mellow in their wanting to implement their values, the easier the crises are if you look back in history. So it actually may bode well that it's kind of late and it's kind of easing its way into it.
All right, let me take another quick break here, and then we'll come back. And I don't know if we can put a handle on this, so I'm going to have you back. I can tell you right now, we're not going to get all the way through this, but there's some interesting scenario. You just mentioned it, Darryl, and that was how baby boomers will begin to ease a little bit, and that brings in the generational science aspect of what you're telling us today. Darryl Howard's our special guest. He's a generational science and neuromarketing expert, and we'll be right back.
Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove. Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove.
Well, today we are really honored to have with us my good friend, Darryl Howard. Darryl is a generational science and neuromarketing expert. He does do consulting work with companies and individuals. And if you'd like to talk to him more about that, you can go to Darryl at darrylhoward.com, or let me encourage you to check out his website. It's a tremendous resource, generationalscience.com. As today we're talking about the mesh of and the melding together of generational science, how one generation responds to another, and how it mixes in with the turnings of history. And I hope that you're gaining some really good information out of this, because I see so many people kind of throwing up their hands and quitting and taking on somewhat of a fatalistic point of view, when really there's great hope in all of this. And I think there's great opportunity, especially to get the gospel out. But, Darryl, I want to come back to fourth turning. We are in one, obviously. And what causes it? I mean, did the war on terror, did 9/11 cause this thing?
No, I think that was a precursor. I think that there are a lot of times there's sparks. There's sparks that don't catch flame, and the economic crisis caught flame. In fact, if you go back and you read Herbert Hoover's recount of the Great Depression and in 1929, the crash, he said it came in waves, and they said they had the Depression cured, but then all of a sudden Europe crashed. And we look at where Greece and Italy and Spain, Portugal, where all those are at today, the condition of the euro. I anticipate that will probably be a factor.
All right.
It was a factor during the Great Depression.
And the economic crisis is worldwide. I think the war on terror was somewhat attack against the United States, and we retaliated against a couple of countries. But for the most part, this economic crisis is worldwide.
Yeah, Strauss and Howe lay out 5 areas where really are the key 5 areas that it can come from. I mean, a revolution or a civil war, originally we thought that one was completely, this will never. Sudden we see Occupy Wall Street, we see these indicators, which to a lot of people will be, well, that's just, this or that. And to us, we look at it and we say, hey, wait a minute, this is an indicator of bigger situation at hand.
Right.
Nukes, the executive branch can shut down, pandemics, foreign countries, but they all have 3 core elements, debt, civic decay, and global disorder. And when you look at some of the countries like Tunisia and Egypt, and you see components like that. So it gives us an indicator.
We're going to run out of time. We're going to run out of time here. Let me fast forward on a couple things, if I may, just for the sake of those listening and watching. I think we all agree we're in a fourth turning, no question about it. We don't like to hear that date 2028, but I guess we'll just have to live through it. But in the meantime, let's start with businesses, because there may be I know some bankers and people, investment companies that listen to this program. They may want to hire you, but what do businesses do in this time?
The biggest thing, Perry, is that people have to realize that third turning strategies won't work. Hey, we've heard this before. This is the way we've done it for 20 years. It's always worked. We're going to continue to do it that way. And all of a sudden, it's not working anymore.
Can you say deficit budgeting and that whole mess by raising the deficit ceiling?
It won't work. I mean, you can't keep doing what you were doing. And the other thing too, for businesses especially, is you have to understand you talk to the heart and not the brain. When everybody doesn't know where who owns their mortgage, the title to their car, whether they're going to have a job tomorrow, all of a sudden we follow our gut. We turn inward, and businesses have to learn to speak to that to the consumer. For families, I think it's equally important for families. What do? The thing is, they have to realize that elders are going to need to be more self-sufficient. This is like a long storm. And if you were to prepare yourself for a winter storm that was coming, how would you prepare your family? Well, you'd make sure that your kids were nearby. You'd make sure that if you didn't have a biological family, which a lot of Gen Xers don't, then you need to be part of something. You need to have non-biological family.
A church.
You need to be part of a church. Exactly. You need to be able to understand, it's not going to get better for a while. And you look at the housing market, 10 years is what I've heard, probably even a little longer. So you need to settle in for the long haul and realize that, okay, we need to do things differently, and that'll help you realize that. If you have a program on the brain that says, okay, Darryl told me about this, Perry has been talking about it, here's what I got to do different.
All right. Let me, what time I got left here, let's fast forward. We're looking for somebody to solve this. We have this mentality, I call it a messianic mentality. We want one person to get us out of this mess, and we want to blame one person. And I've looked at the autonomy of our own selves. There's the shock and awe. We wake up and we're in shock and awe of what's happening. The next one is what I call anger and blame. We get mad and we want to blame somebody. And unfortunately, too many of us stay in that stage. And then the third one is we take personal responsibility. We realize, I can't change it all, but I can fix what's around me. I can take responsibility and get control of my environment. But we're going into a presidential cycle. And you and I go down this road a lot, but how do you see it?
I see it like the election of 1860. Republicans formed the party in 1856, or they started electing Republicans, I think, in 1856. By 1858, they had taken control of the United States House of Representatives. By 1860, they had taken control of the Senate, and they had elected President Lincoln. Everybody thinks, well, 1860 was when we elected Lincoln. They forget that 2 years prior to that, we took the House. 1860, we took the Senate. And a similar type thing happened between the 1930 and 32 elections, except the Democrats took it. So I think we're in a position like 1930 and 1932, except in reverse. I think actually Obama's in the position of Herbert Hoover. And Republicans took the equivalent of the 1930 elections. We're now moving into the 1932 elections. And I think that's one of the reasons that Gingrich has come on, is because people look for somebody to lead us through the crisis. And they may see him as Strauss and Howe define in their book, The Fourth Turning, as a gray champion that comes out of the fog to wiser and older. And okay, this is the Winston Churchill of the day, I think, actually.
All right. Him being a history professor and a history historian, that's got to play into his favorability as well, because he understands this stuff. And I might add, ladies and gentlemen, that Darryl's had the unique opportunity to make this presentation to the former speaker. So in some ways, he understands what you're talking about, but as a historian, he really gets it. He sees the cycle.
Yeah, he understands the long, when you look back 500 years or you're looking ahead to the next 50 years, I think he understands probably better than most. And I think there's a difference between, and worked with a lot of politicians, there's a difference between people who want to get elected and people who want to do the right thing, even if it's not the right thing for them. And I think that's probably where we're at in history. You look, he had to win the Civil War, even though, it may kill him in the end. He had to win the Civil War. He had to save the Union. And that was paramount. FDR was very much the same way. And those are both baby boomers. And I believe that in this election cycle, we'll probably vote out the Gen Xer. President Obama's a Gen Xer. And we'll bring in a baby boomer. And currently, the front two baby boomers are Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney.
All right. By the way, I want to get you back. We need to go through the millennials, the Xers, the boomers, and the silencers, because I think that is a fascinating study. And I think every time I hear it, and people hear it, kind of go, yep, he's right. But do you think that Mitt or Romney or Herman Cain, or let's take Rick Perry, do they have this Churchillian appeal that Newt has?
No, I don't. There is, for those who want to look it up on the internet, there's a story in Twice Told Tales by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and he talks about this great champion coming out of the fog during the Puritan generation, and how he was wiser, and and that's really, I can only convey it as an essence of, there's a feel to it. And I don't see that within or hear any of the other candidates looking at the problems in the same way that Gingrich has. There's plenty of opportunity, but I haven't seen it.
All right. Darryl, thanks for your time. I want to get you back. I know we had to chop some of this a little short, but it's a fascinating study. We'll get you back on. I want to go through the generations because I think that is also a fascinating study, especially in today's culture. So we see how to really to witness to people. I think is part of it. To extend God's love to people is part of it. So Darryl Howard's with the day, and check it out. GenerationalScience.com is his website. It's a tremendous resource. If you want to talk to Darryl directly, Darryl@DarrylHoward.com. And let me say to you businesses out there listening, you may want to call him and get him on your team because he can really help you understand and get some things going. Darryl, thanks, buddy. Say hi to Sandy and everything going on up there.
Thanks, Perry.
Stay warm. God bless you, pal. We love you. See you, man.
Thanks. God bless you, too.
Okay. And we'll see you tomorrow.